News Gang is here, and tonight, trouble at Boeing following that air crash in Ethiopia. What is it about that plane? Boynet bows out, bounces right into a new job. You can't make this stuff up. Also on the show tonight, Professor Magoha's Intre. Is the surgeon what the doctor ordered for Kenya's education mess? And the damning claims about those dams, why it isn't water under the bridge just yet. And in a week where everyone has been speaking French, I could as well say bienvenue à notre émission ce soir, mesdames et messieurs. I basically just
showing off.
I mean, pourquoi pas?
Okay, for the sake of Gachuri, who comes from Mushava, I just meant welcome to our program tonight. Anyway, an interesting week, but also a very sad week, ladies and gentlemen. This week started on that tragic Sunday with that air crash off the skies of Ethiopia. Jamila, what stood out for you in that house?
I remember we were working that day, that Sunday, and I know Yvonne is going to talk a bit more about the media and how information was given out about the crash. But the first one was at 10:50 a.m. when there was a tweet by the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed saying that there's a plane that had taken off from Ethiopia on its way to Nairobi, and he was saying even condolences. He was sending condolence messages to families, and everyone was wondering what, because that was the first information that came out about the crash, and then now ultimately they found out that the plane had gone missing 6 minutes after taking off from Bole International Airport, and then it went down an area called Bishoftu, which is about 60 kilometers from Addis Ababa. And then now the information trickling into family members about it, 32 Kenyans lost their lives, and it's very sad. And up to today, we had a story early in the day of relatives who have flown to Addis Ababa, and the main thing they're asking for is we want the bodies of our loved ones to bury. But it is a sad state of affairs because the process will take very long, identification using DNA to try and identify the bodies of the victims of the accident. But what comes up that it has across the world is about the Boeing 737 MAX 8, the plane that went down 6 minutes
Boeing
after takeoff.
Yes,
because the plane went down 6 minutes after takeoff, and everyone keeps talking about what happened to another flight, Indonesia. It's called Lion Air, operated the same Boeing 737 MAX 8. That was on October 29th last year. It also went down shortly after takeoff
and
in
was
Jakarta.
Just as new as this
as
one.
new as this one, because this one is 4 months old, and the Jakarta accident killed 189 people. And people were saying, how can a plane of this particular type get into an accident less than 6 months apart and kill all those people? The same Boeing 737 MAX 8 has actually been involved in 12 other incidents since 2018. But then there were no fatalities in those incidents. So a lot of questions have come up about this particular model, and of course now the grounding across the world of the flights, of the plane.
Wow. Wanagaikai.
Well, what stands out is, life comes first. It's such a tragic event, and especially for Kenya because we lost the most number of people, 32, and the stories are harrowing. I mean, some of those stories are really, really heartbreaking, and it's just that we wish the families affected our condolences. But talking of the broader issue of Boeing, this is the biggest body blow on the brand Boeing. And one person that captured that is Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, who said that a brand is at stake as well. And that brand is not just Boeing, but America. Boeing is the biggest, one of the two biggest global manufacturers of aeroplanes. What is this story saying about the quality of their work? We saw some documentary on Al Jazeera the other day that is also raising questions about...
A wing and a prayer.
Yes. Look at that. Those questions are very, very damaging for Boeing.
But
let's remember that...
What struck me, Linus, was how a lot of governments responded. I mean, some are saying, please don't fly over airspace. Some saying, no, we don't want it in our airports. Incredibly interesting in terms of how seriously countries take the safety of their citizens.
Absolutely. And also, right at the opposite of those actions by governments was the Federal Aviation Authority in the US, which was very aware of the brand threat here.
Yes.
That look, what are we saying about a very, very big company in America? What are we saying about the quality of their products? And FAA held back for a long time.
They did.
Until I think, is it early today or late yesterday, that they now said it's okay, let's ground all the aeroplanes because of the information we have received. We have additional evidence that it's no longer safe to have those aeroplanes operating. But there are a lot of lessons coming out of this incident.
Yvonne, reporting around this, quite interesting things that we saw, including how the information first came.
Yes, indeed. I just wanted to add, America being at the very end of making a statement on this. And journalist Howard French on Twitter said, America is leading from the rear with this one because it took them quite a long time to finally make the decision to ground these flights. But I mean, like Jamila said, the first we heard of this was the Ethiopian Prime Minister's tweet. And he passes condolences and everyone is, wait, what crash? Where is this? In fact, at some point, some people thought his account had been hacked or, what was this? Because nobody had heard of a plane going missing, a plane crashing, and therefore a fatality. So in this one tweet, he's not only telling us what happened, he's already speaking about it. So maybe, some lessons to be learned there. And then after that, we had the Kenya's Transport Cabinet Secretary speaking at 1 p.m. and we're all still struggling to find out whether there were any survivors until BBC's tweet came a little bit after that. But here's where the controversy begins, and it's similar to the same reportage we saw during Dusit. So the Associated Press at 3:26 tweeted this, and by this time the nationalities had already been known and had been announced by CS Macharia. They said, authorities say Canadians, Americans, Italians, Indians, French, British, Egyptians amongst those killed. There was no mention of Ethiopians. There was no mention of Kenyans, who together, were the majority of those who'd been killed. And then, of course, there was the TRT world anchor. TRT is Turkish.
Yes.
And she was having an interview with an aviation analyst, young man who seems very knowledgeable, Alex Macheras. And she suggested that ET has a poor safety record, and he was very quick to correct her. He said, ET is an incredibly safe and trusted airline. This is not an airline with a poor safety record. Richard Quest of CNN did so as well. But it goes on, because now they're starting to question about how the West reports. Well, the issues have been there, but it's becoming very open. Rachel Maddow, whom I really love, from SNBC, did a report yesterday talking about all the countries that had, grounded it, and she had this map. She was showing the countries that had banned it. There was no African country that showed up on her map, considering that Ethiopia was the first to actually ground those ones. Howard French, again, called it a characteristic routine erasure.
Doesn't it matter what map she was using?
Okay, but here's another thing I wanted to talk about. Also, the paper, was it the Daily Mail from the UK, that quoted a condolence message from our own deputy president and captioned him as the deputy president of Ethiopia. So it's just all of these things. But I'd like to talk a little bit just very quickly about the communication that you talked about. We're seeing the families very frustrated. So this is what's important about the International Civil Aviation Organization, that mandates how information is supposed to flow out with an airline, that is supposed to be constant, timely, and they're also supposed to provide counseling, so that the families that went there on Monday, did they understand they might not get the bodies of their victims immediately, the DNA process, the state of the bodies. I'm not saying ET was necessarily wrong, but in such a delicate matter like this, I think there's still lots of lessons to be learned, and the International Civil Aviation Organization can institute sanctions against an airline that doesn't properly communicate.
I look at it this way, Joe. You see, lives matter.
They do.
Actually, all lives matter. Even if it is one life that was lost, it is disastrous enough. It's also how sensitive we are as a people and how sensitive we deal with some of this information. Look, when an airplane crashes, the chances of survivors very minimal. So probably it would have been even incumbent on our Kenyan authorities to prepare the relatives of the victims in advance, even before they went to Ethiopia, that these are the possibilities, these are the likelihoods, this is what you may expect there. Because they had some information by the time they allowed the Kenyan team to leave for Ethiopia. And so when you see the frustrations that Sikolia was demonstrating to us today, it goes to show that probably there's some insensitivity that goes into it. And truth be told, I mean, the families may not easily get the remains of their relatives, not just yet, until, I mean, the authorities there and the investigators are very, very sure about it. So it's a longer process. But,
but Joe, I covered the Douala air crash when the Kenyaways went down in Douala. And from that, my takeout was it's so difficult for anybody, whether the airline or government, to prepare for a moment like that. It's extremely...
It throws everybody into
Yes, and you can see they're trying to do their best. What was worse about Douala was nobody knew where the plane was. It was somewhere in the forest. And I remember we were walking for kilometers in a swamp looking for this aircraft. I think the Ethiopian government did well in terms of the initial stages of a crisis communication situation, except of course, Yvonne, that this early tweet from the Prime Minister's office should have given out a little bit more.
Or perhaps I should have heard from the airline first. That, you know, our plane has, you know.
Yes, because like you say, I remember that morning what we were trying to do is to first of all verify whether this is a genuine account.
But so that we move on.
Joe, one thing, I'm going to interrupt you, I'm sorry for a second. We're talking about the airline, and we mentioned about Boeing and this plane, and something that comes to mind is the fact that now Boeing itself has gotten a beating in terms of its reputation in the world, especially after this accident. And I'd like to say something, Joe, about this plane crash and the one in Indonesia. They both crashed just minutes after takeoff. Both struggled to gain altitude and both appeared to ascend, and they said several times before crashing. It's been said that Boeing and Airbus are the biggest airplane manufacturing companies in the world. Boeing is slightly higher, slightly more bigger than Airbus in terms of how many aircraft is delivered. Boeing was founded in 1916. That's a long time. It has delivered over 19,000 aircrafts to date, and that's double what Airbus has delivered, which is about 11,000. But the point here is that Airbus had come up with an fleet of planes that were fuel efficient. And it is said that Boeing came up with the 737 MAX 8 to counter that. But apparently it brought about some, what they're calling aerodynamic challenges, which prompted the manufacturer, who is Boeing, to introduce a self-correcting mechanism. However, this wasn't revealed in the original pilot training manual that companies that bought the aircraft, to the companies that bought the aircraft, this mechanism that's called the self-correcting mechanism. And although Boeing eventually sent circulars to all these airline companies about this, and the recommendation that their pilots should be trained,
actually
this now it could have been.
The criticism has been that first some people think that the MAX 8 was developed a bit too quickly in response to this, but also the fact that this information about the new aircraft requiring retraining of some sort of pilots was not disclosed. But there are also suggestions that some airlines, perhaps in trying to save costs, did not quite do that. But
Joe, safety.
Even just one point.
Even as you speak about safety, you see, to the victims, to the families of the victims, all that you're saying probably ni kizungu mingi. What they would want is information, timely information, and secondly, to know the truth about what could have happened and what claimed the lives of their relatives. More often than not, when these kind of scenarios occur, because of the huge brands that are involved, I hope there won't be any cover-up. Or maybe some blame. Maybe say the pilot was not competent and so on and so forth. I hope there will be truth in terms of the information.
We need to move on.
37 MAX. And I think the hint of commercial pressure is actually tragic, because this was the fastest selling equipment from Boeing in Boeing's history. They sold over 4,500 aircrafts to 100 different operators globally. So, and I'm relating this to the documentary that we watched. Was this a fast food version of aircraft that sold so quickly, made so much money for Boeing, but has just killed so many people?
Obviously, a very, very long conversation, and the jury, I think, is still out there about what really happened.